Okay, guys. Well, thank you for attending, everybody. We will get started, and we are very blessed to have Simon with us today. Hey, Simon.
Hello, good morning.
So we've got the chat box on the right-hand side. The chat box is for you guys to chat amongst yourselves and to discuss what's going on here. And we've also got the Q&A box. So if there's any questions that you want to ask as we go through this, please shout them out. Now, this is a masterclass. So I know there's lots of webinars and web events, but I always kind of term these as masterclass. And in my mind, you know, this is not like an information session. This is not just educating you and sharing some things. This is distinctly designed to help you to move forward in your business, to make a change. It's okay taking notes and making notes, but unless you're actually taking action off the back of this, nothing is actually going to be any different in your business and in your life moving forward. And, you know, this has been carefully designed to actually move something forward. And if we can help a few of you today to make those 1 or 2 degree adjustments in your business and your life to improve things, remove stress, make life easier, you know, serve your clients to a greater degree, make more cash, anything like that, then we've done our job today. Okay, so we're very fortunate to have Simon Chaplin with us. Simon Chaplin runs an accountancy firm called Greenstones, which he's going to be talking into very shortly. And he also coaches accountants as well through a series of coaching programs that he's got. And what I love about Simon is because he's got such a depth of knowledge that spans, is it decades, Simon? It is decades in your firm.
It is decades, yeah, unfortunately.
Decades.
Yeah.
That whenever there's a challenge or a question that I ask of Simon, he can always go into so much depth, and there's just so many layers into what he goes into because of his experience, not only in his own firm and all the challenges he's got and he's worked through and still working through, you know, there's no such thing as the perfect firm, but all of the firms he's been helping over the years as well. So as you may know, I'm a director of an accountancy firm, MAP. And when we have challenges, and we have challenges all the time, then, you know, Paul will reach out to Simon and work with him. I think we're working with you on something specific at the moment, Simon, or a few challenges that we've got at the moment. And, you know, Simon's just a great person to go through because I know we're going to get the help that we need. So welcome, Simon.
Welcome. And whoever that is that's saying that I'm not over 40, I am over 40. I'm 47. Although last week I did try and convince somebody I was 38. Not deliberately. I just forgot I'd lost 10 years of my life. Anyway.
I like it. I like it. I think I'm still 24 in my mind, Simon, so that's absolutely fine. So could you just kind of talk into Greenstones a little bit for me, please, Simon? Just kind of paint a picture so people can understand where you are and what you've achieved there.
Yeah, so Greenstones, I bought Greenstones off a chap called Roger Stone back in 2002. Back then it was £250,000 turnover and making very little money, and there was 6 team members. If I fast forward to today, we're turning over just shy of £1.4 million. We've got 22 people work for us. And the unique aspect of it really is that all of those team members, apart from one who chooses not to, can work wherever they like and whenever they like. So we've gone from what was a reason. Well, we had timesheets. We didn't have clocking in cards and stuff like that, but we had timesheets and all that traditional accountancy practice stuff all the way through to where we are today.
That's amazing. I mean, 22 people, that's obviously, you know, a lot of members of staff and a lot of potential brilliance and greatness and a lot of potential challenges as well. You know, managing people, I think, will always be the hardest challenge. Finding great people, keeping great people, helping them to flourish will always be the biggest challenge that anyone faces in their firm. And so, you know, it's amazing that you've got that number of people, Simon, and you've got that working well. How long have you been doing it since you've been working wherever they want and whenever they want? So they can literally, I mean, they have to work a set number of hours a week. They work as much as they want, whenever they want, wherever they want.
Yeah, so it is truly work wherever you like, whenever you like. So just to share a little bit more of my background, 2002, when I bought the accountancy practice, I was 27, just shy of 27 years old, and pretty, looking back, arrogant. Some people might call it confident, but I believed I knew more than what I did. And one of the ways that I was going to work is I was going to work harder than anybody else in order to create a successful accountancy practice. So fast forward 3 years, to the end of 2005, beginning of 2006. And at that point, I was working 6.5 days a week. So all day Saturday and Sunday morning. And I gave myself the privilege of having Sunday afternoons off, because back in those days, you could watch the football on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Very often I would lose those Sunday afternoons. And it wasn't just a normal working day. I was starting at 7 o'clock in the morning and working through till 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. Wow. And the challenge around that for me was to be successful. And ultimately I was seeking approval of customers and the team. Now, at the beginning of 2006, I went round my mum's, and I'm very partial to a bit of roast beef and Yorkshire pudding and a glass of red wine. And mum had cooked Sunday lunch. And at the end of the lunch, I'd already drank a bottle of wine. I'd eaten my beef. I was pouring myself a brandy, and I was going outside for a cigar, because that, in my mind at that time, was what successful business owners did. We drank brandy and smoked cigars. And mum, in her wisdom, said to me, Simon, you are smoking, you're drinking, you're overweight, and you're working too hard. I don't understand how your business can be as successful as what it is, but your personal life is basically a mess. So I was very much single back then as well. That's right. Yeah. So that kicked me into some personal development work. And ultimately, going through that process, I started challenging myself in the way that Greenstones worked, in order for everybody ultimately to be treated as grown up or more grown up. And that's ultimately where work where you like and when you like came from. In 2009, it was trialed, and ultimately we haven't looked back since. So to have absolute clarity over it, there are no hours are not monitored at all. So I've had team members work the summer in Las Vegas. They've got a place out in Las Vegas. I've had people working on beaches. I've had people working Sunday nights. I've had one scenario with a young man that worked Christmas Day, because that's what he was choosing. That was what he was choosing to do. So as long as they deliver the outputs in return for the salary that I pay them, I am delighted. And ultimately, I don't care, as I say, I don't care where they do it and when they do it. Now, there is one statutory requirement. They have to have the ability of having, 28 days, including the bank holiday, 28 days undisturbed leave. So we can't disturb them. They have that entitlement. But if they want to not work on a Monday because it's a duvet day, or they want to go and watch Star Wars on a Friday afternoon, then they are perfectly entitled to do that.
It's amazing, Simon. Like, if you hadn't given that history and you was kind of talking about, what your firm is doing now, people could think that this is in response to COVID and what's happened, because this sounds like a very contemporary way of working. That's very respectful of the team and achieving your outputs that you're doing. And just in that firm, so before you're working 6.5 days a week, smoking brandy, overweight, drinking brandy, smoking cigars, overweight. And how many days a week are you working in Greenstones now?
Well, pre-COVID, it was 38 days a year. So I have all of the school holidays off. So if Ben and Amy are on holiday, then I am on holiday with them. As with all business owners, I deal with some emails. I have 4 weeks undisturbed. So I have 2 weeks in the summer and 2 weeks over Christmas undisturbed. But the other week's holiday, I do emails and stuff like that, but I don't have any appointments or anything like that. So I was working 1 day a week. So my Wednesdays were allocated to working at Greenstones. I had the accountants mastermind was Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Mondays and Fridays I either walked or planned, or when Ben and Amy were at home before they went to school, I spent the days with those. Now, since COVID happened, that's all gone a bit it's all got a bit messed up. So when Boris stood up on that Monday night and said, everybody needs to work from home. Basically, the team came into work on the Tuesday morning, they picked up their possessions and they went home. And the majority of them haven't been back in the office since. And apart from that crazy period at the beginning where we lost money in April and a little bit of May, we have been just as efficient and just as profitable as we were pre-COVID, because of the way we've been working, as I say, since 2009.
So now post-COVID, how many days a week are you working? Or is that?
Well, I wouldn't want to put my hand on the heart and say I am definitely working this, because it's all, as I say, so Tuesday. So today's accountants mastermind. This afternoon it's Greenstones, and it's all a little bit messed up. I know I was doing more certainly doing a lot more post COVID, and it's going back to where it was. However, there are one or two things within the accountancy practice at the moment where I am getting sucked back in because as a senior team member had a baby, and therefore I'm supporting some other team members around that. And there's one or two other different bits and bobs going on. So if I had to guess, James, I'd say 2 days a week, two days a week tops.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's still an amazing thing for 1.4 million pound revenue business, 22 people, and you're working two days a week. That's brilliant. We're starting to get some questions firing in, Simon, but just my final question on you there is, so you work just life like outside of work now. I mean, working like that, you have a young family and you're much more active and you're running a lot, and you've kind of alluded to that, but the quality of life outside of work, because to my mind, success is not just about, you know, if you're a multimillionaire, but you have no friends and you're out of shape and your personal relationships are terrible and you're not seeing your kids and stuff, you are not successful. In fact, you're probably more unsuccessful than, you know, someone nowhere near that level of revenue. But you would kind of say more holistically, your entire life feels and is more successful.
Massively. So it's a world apart to where it was back in 2006. So I've lost it. Back then I was 15 stone 6. This morning I've weighed in at 13 stone 2. So I've lost a bit over 2 stone, and I've been a lot lower than that pre-COVID as well. I was going to say that I've never missed a sports day and never missed a nativity play for Ben and Amy. But when I shared that with Sally the other night, Sally said, "You missed that sports day in 2016 when," and I thought, okay, so I've missed one sports day and never missed a nativity play. I take Ben and Amy to school and fetch them from school more often than what Sally does. So I take them and bring them back. And we have all the usual family issues, don't get me wrong, but I spend a significant amount of my time with Ben and Amy and Sally too. So
that's brilliant. We've got an agenda we're working through here, Simon, but the questions are coming in thick and fast. And I'd much rather deal with the questions than go through the questions that I've got for you. So how do you measure their output? Now, all these questions appear to be from Morgan J. They're not, but if people can just kind of put their names next to the questions as they're asking them, please. So I know you're actually asking them, but so I'll have to ask them anonymously, Simon. Sorry, but how do you measure their output?
So fundamentally, the output is KPIs, so key performance indicators. So we work out what key performance indicators they need to produce, along with some roles and responsibilities. And then as long as they hit their numbers, I am more than happy. So I am paying an individual £2,000, and in return for that, they produce, say, £10,000 worth of fees, accounts with no queries. They answer emails within 5 minutes or within 24 hours or whatever the thing is. So every team member has a set of key performance indicators that they need to hit each month. Now, the important part of the key performance indicators is that they need to have some balance. So lots of people, they set KPIs or key performance indicators for their team, and they focus on fees because they want the money in and they want to make a profit. Now, if you focus on fees only, that's a quantity issue, a quantity KPI. If you focus on that solely, you might get lots of rubbish. Yep. So every team member needs to have 3 KPIs. They need to have a quantity measure, a quality measure, so how good is the stuff that they're producing, and then ultimately a qualification measure. Now, qualification doesn't necessarily mean in the traditional sense of the word of doing your CPD and doing your exams, but every person, I'm a massive learner, huge learner, and I want the people in my organization, within my team, to learn as well and develop and provide a better service to the customers. So every team member has a development activity target, a qualification target. So it's quantity, quality, and qualification. And I'm sure we're going to get onto some specifics around that in a moment, James.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Do the team communicate what their working plans are the week before so that team members know when they can communicate with them or plan any meetings, etc.?
No is the simple answer to that. So there's a couple of questions that come up with this. So one of the questions is, how do I know if my team member is working? Yeah. Now, the assumption is that they are working.
Right. Okay.
Not that they are not working. Now, can I disturb a team member? So let's just say it's a Sunday afternoon and Simon is working and I need to speak to Mark. Now, I can ring Mark and Mark sees my phone number come up on his phone, and he has a choice. He can treat me, well, I always say like the mother-in-law. So if the mother-in-law rings up on a Sunday afternoon, I have a choice as to whether I answer that or not. Now, she can leave a message. So if I choose not to answer it, she can leave a message, and then I can listen to it. And if she's in difficulty, then I can go and choose to return it. If she's just ringing up for a chat, then I can leave it until the following Monday or whatever. And that's exactly the same with Mark. So if I ring Mark on a Sunday, he can choose to ignore it. And as long as he rings me back within 3 working hours, so in our scenario, in this case, it would be 11:30 on Monday, then Mark is operating within his roles and responsibilities. Now, Mark might be working on a Sunday afternoon, so he might pick up the phone and we might have a chat, a normal work chat, and then it's dealt with and we move on. But the assumption is that people are working, not that they are not working. And as long as they meet their roles and responsibilities, then I am more than happy with that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. How do you justify salary versus hours for non-fee earning staff?
So the non-fee earning staff, the what we call customer care assistants, they are paid a salary, and they have targets just exactly the same as what the fee earning staff do. Mentally, there's a bit of a shift in this for lots of people, but the admin team, the customer care team, are contributing to the performance of the wider organization. So one of the targets, for example, is to make sure that their control panel, so every team member has a list of tasks that they need to do. One of their key performance indicators is to make sure that all of the tasks are done on time. So that's one of their measures. If they're producing letters or emails, which it happens less and less now because they're all templated, but if they forget to change something or forget to change a number or they miss something out of the letter, then that counts as a learning point. So that's the quality measure. So the quantity measure is the control panels for the customer care team, and the quality measure is obviously the mistakes that they are making. We also, and we're just in the process of changing this, because the customer care department are a service department, the customers of that department, generally speaking, are the accounts team. We used to survey the accounts team to get basically a net promoter score based on the individuals that are within the customer care department. But I'm not convinced that was working very successfully. So we're in the process of moving that.
That's great. We're going to move back into your questions, Simon, because I think there's so many questions coming through, and thank you, everyone. Please keep them coming in. But I know that we're going to be answering a lot of these as we work through some of the other things, Simon. I'm just going to answer one final one before we move on to the agenda, which is how do you track those KPIs?
Excel spreadsheet. So okay. It's as simple as that. So we have an Excel spreadsheet with all of the numbers on, and the team members go into that Excel spreadsheet. In the majority of them, the team members go into that Excel spreadsheet and they put the numbers in, and they monitor their own performance within that spreadsheet. Over the years, we've tried all sorts of different things, some software, cloud-based software, and every time we've moved over and we've gone through that process, is it as good as the Excel spreadsheet? No, it's a simple answer. So we've gone back to the Excel spreadsheet.
I love that. I think so often, Simon, people have an outcome that they want to achieve, and then what they do is they purposefully put obstacles in the way to prevent them from achieving that. Whether it's right, we've got to find a piece of technology, we've got to learn that technology, we've got to put it in. It's like, hang on a second, what are we just trying to do here? What's the fastest way to do it and the simplest way to do it? Whether that's Post-it notes on a wall or an Excel spreadsheet, we can always figure out the technology later, but the important part is to get that process right and to actually get it in action and to get it working.
Yeah, I love a gadget. So I'm the first in the queue. If there's a new piece of software or a new iPad or a Remarkable or anything like that, I am first in the queue for that. But ultimately, the Excel spreadsheet, it's there. Everybody in the team knows how to use it. It's like you can add comments, you can see the numbers, you can change the conditional formatting. And even over the last 6 weeks, I've been looking at adding macros and programming through VBA, not me, but somebody else, in order to speed up that process. And when we've looked at it, it's like, now it just makes it even more complicated. And if that button goes wrong, then the whole thing falls down. Now, there is some stuff in the background. Again, if people have looked at Power BI, there are ways that we are developing and working with Power BI to put those numbers in automatically. But the downside of that is if they're going in automatically, then the team members don't have, in my opinion, they don't have as much ownership on the numbers. So if I'm going in, my target's 10 grand and I'm physically typing in 9,500, and then the number is moving, the practice number is moving, and the difference is moving, they can physically see that as they do it, and hopefully they feel a little bit of pain in that they've not hit in the 10. Now, if a machine is generating those numbers and automatically, I think there's a lack of or less emotional connection to it.
Yeah, and I completely agree. You need to feel that. You need sense. It's a bit like just tapping a card on a, if you're trying to want to get someone in control of their finances, you take the card off them, because tapping a card at the checkout is easy. You get them paying cash again, because there's something about handing over money is felt. That's absolutely right. And there is a danger that technology removes that connection and the understanding of what fundamentally is happening here. So I'd completely agree. That's really important. Okay.
So just to build on that, James, if I can, because you just reminded me of something we're doing at Greenstone. So because we're handling numbers day in, day out, minute out, the numbers become almost intangible. They become abstract. So it's 10 grand, or we're writing off 200 quid or whatever the figures are. Now at Greenstones, what we did is we had some notes designed. So Greenstones currency. Okay, so the target's 10 grand, and 10 grand is an abstract figure because it's a bigger number than lots of people have got in their bank account, etc., etc. Now, if we create or if we print £10,000 worth of Greenstones notes and we give it to the team member, all of a sudden that money becomes tangible. Now, it sounds a bit odd, but they are proper design notes. I'm the king, obviously, and then the other person on the other side are various business owners, Dyson and people like that. And when we had them produced, and we've got £1,000 notes and various other different currencies, I asked one of the customer team to produce £50,000 worth of Greenstones currency. And they went away and did that on the photocopier, chopped it all up and all the rest of it. And then they put it on my desk. And another one of the team members said, "You're not going to leave that there, Simon, are you?" And I said, "Oh, why not?" And they said, "Well, somebody might see it." And I thought, but it didn't. But they was that connected to the value, and they thought it was real 50,000 bed when it wasn't. It was just basically photocopies.
Yeah, I love that. Bringing it into the real world, not to that extent, but if there's anything that we really want to focus on in our business. So let's say, for example, I'm talking about the accounting firm here. Like there's a challenge with getting annual accounts done or something like that. We actually will write it up on the wall so that people can see how many weeks over are we outstanding, and we put league tables up, and people have to actually go and tick people off and things like that. So to create that physical, mental connection with what's going on in the real world,
Yeah, and if you want to look more deeply into that, there's a great book called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. To change when change is hard, and the note idea came from the rubber glove idea out of that book.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, so in terms of the fundamentals that you need to have this in place to be able to make this work, Simon. Yeah.
Number one is clear direction for the accountancy practice. And when I say clear direction for the accountancy practice, that needs to be in numbers. Yeah. So what numbers is the practice going to achieve? Once you've got the numbers for the practice, you then boil it down into who is responsible and what are the team members' numbers. What are their KPIs? So practice first, then the team members. And what you might find is when you first do it, it's the practice owner that's responsible for the majority of the KPIs. And then it's a process, a game, I often say, we have to play and transfer responsibility from the practice owner down to the individuals. So key performance indicators for the practice, drill them down into the individuals. And then you also need some values, or some people call them rules of the game. So if you just say, right, go out and produce 10 grand worth of fees, they can just obviously, and there's no rules, they can go out, technically they could go out, they could break the law, they could forget to do the money laundering track, they could forget to do a whole load of different things. So in order to have some boundaries, you need to create the rules of the game, or the values under which people operate. So one of those for us, as I've already shared, is that you have to return a telephone call within 3 working hours. So that's one of the non-numbered responsibilities.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're talking about the numbers for the firm, Simon, could you give us some examples of that? And I don't mean like specifics for your firm, but what type of numbers do people focus on when they're setting these targets and clear direction for the firm?
I'm more than happy to share our numbers. There's no confidentiality around that. There's no secret around it. They're just numbers ultimately. So if anybody wants numbers, then I will gladly share those. So the big one for me is your purpose number. Okay, so what is it that you are attempting to achieve with your accountancy practice, and how do you know whether you're achieving it? So for Greenstone's mission is to inspire, challenge, and support business owners and their teams to be the very best they want to be. So we measure whether we're inspiring, challenging, and supporting our customers. Yeah, and that's done by way of a survey. Some firms, they measure tax saving. So we want to save our customers tax. So they measure whether they're saving their customers tax or not. Some improve our clients' net worth is another one that lots use. So they measure whether they're increasing the client's net worth. So that's the purpose number. Always measure customer happiness and team happiness. So you've got a happy team, you'll have happy customers. And then generally speaking, the rest of the key performance indicators fall into leading indicators and lagging indicators. So the leading indicators are predictors of the future, such as customer happiness and team happiness, and the lagging indicators are basically the accounts. So they are things that have happened in the past that tell you what have happened, rather than the leading ones that are predictors of the future. Now, when you go and start looking at KPIs, there are 5 that I recommend that every accountancy practice measures. That's purpose, team happiness, customer happiness, team cost to fees, and EWOOs to fees. And then in the book that I've written, which we'll be talking about a bit later, I've added 18 more KPIs in there that you can pick from. And until you've actually worked out where it is that you're going, what it is that you want to achieve, then it's almost impossible to set those KPIs. So I'll give you another real life example. So we have firms, I'm working with firms that would like to take all of their customers onto real time. So to be producing accounts in real time. Yeah. So one of the numbers that they should be measuring is how many customers have they got on real time accounts. Yeah. It's pretty obvious. It's a pretty obvious measure. Yeah. I've got customers that want to help their accountancy customers that want to help their customers understand their cash flow forecast. So they're measuring their clients' understanding of cash flow forecast. So whatever it is that you want to achieve, I don't know, increase cash, then measure your cash balance, your direct debits that you're collecting. If you want to sell it in 3 years' time, you might be focusing on measuring GRF or EBITDA or whatever it is. So until you've actually got your focus, what it is, then you can't really decide on your KPIs. But as I said, in the book, there's 23 in total, but 18 others that you could pick from, because lots of firms measure the similar things. Like, so we need more customers. Okay, so measure leads converted, leads generated, and whether they are a good client or a bad client. There's 3 more KPIs there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. Could you just go through the 5 again, please, just a little bit more slowly? Sarah's asking what the main 5 are that you were talking about.
Sorry. So the main one is the purpose number. So it's the number that represents what you are attempting to achieve, where you're going with your accountancy practice. Okay. And the next one is team happiness. So how happy are your team? Basically it's a net promoter score. How likely are you to recommend working at Greenstones to your friends and family? Okay. The next one is customer happiness. So the customer is, again, how likely are you to recommend Greenstones to your friends and family? And then team costs to fees. So what percentage of your fees are you spending on your team? Yeah, because obviously that depending on what your strategy is. So if you're delivering a high value service, your team cost of fees will probably be higher than if you're running a sausage factory and just churning out lots of little jobs. So, but you need to measure that to make sure that you're operating as efficiently as possible. And then the last one that I always encourage accountancy practices is extra work orders to fees. So what extra are you selling to your customers as a percentage of fees? And that should run, on average, it runs at about 15%. So if you're turning over £100,000 worth of fees, the extra work that you're selling each year should be about £15,000. Now, the reason why I get people to focus on that, James, and you'll have talked about this lots of times, is because people love blogging, LinkedIn, revising websites, and all the other rubbish that there's an excitement about that. And one of the reasons why people get excited about all that sort of stuff is because there's somebody else to blame. So if it goes wrong and it doesn't generate leads, then we can blame the website people or the person that taught us LinkedIn, or LinkedIn's rubbish, or Twitter's not, or blah, 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 blah. There's always somebody else to blame. Whereas if we step back and focus on what it is that we have already got, and I know pricing's number one, so make sure your pricing is right. And that's why we use GoProposal for that, in order to make sure that the pricing is delivered correctly and consistently across the practice. That's within Greenstones. So make sure your pricing's right. The second thing is it's far easier to sell stuff to your current customers because they already know, like, and trust you, hopefully, and therefore you should be having a conversation with them about other services that you can provide. And that's where the EWOO comes in, the extra work order to turnover comes in. And then the last one, just as an aside before you get into websites, is to concentrate on referrals. So most business for most accountancy practices comes from referrals. And when you speak to accountants, most of them haven't got a clue how to generate referrals or any system to do that. So they're the 5. And that's why I'm so passionate about the extra work orders to fees metric.
That's great. Thank you, Simon. Can you just explain, I don't think I've got this as a question, but so we're talking about kind of top level metrics there for your firm to get right. And you've got to get that direction right first, because until you've got clarity around that, then how can you kind of know what your team are meant to be doing, etc.? How can you even begin to implement any of this stuff? And obviously there's a piece of work there where firm owners would have to set time aside and really think that through, and to make sure they're confident in that. And I know from doing this myself, it's very easy to come up with kind of arbitrary metrics. I always remember when Paul did this with me with GoProposal a few years ago, when we were setting our budget and forecast for the year. And he's like, how many clients do you want? I'm like, 1,000. He's like, why? I'm like, 1,000, innit? 1,000 clients. He says, yeah, but what does it mean? Like, what are you actually trying to do in your life? Like, what are you and Becky wanting to do? And when we started to figure out what we wanted and then what the business would need to do to give us that, I can't remember what the number was, but it's like 486 clients. Okay, well, that's your target. Let's go 486 clients. You don't need, everything else is ego, but, what's actually going to make a difference in your life? What's going to show up? What's going to improve that quality of life? So I know there's a piece of work to do around that, Simon. But my question to you is how does that then filter down from the top, the direction, through to teams and through to individuals? And I appreciate that's a massive question, Simon, but could you just give people a sense of how that then moves through and cascades down?
So say for example, you sit down and you work out that you want 3 holidays a year, or whatever it is, yeah, and you need to generate £100,000 worth of net profit a year, and therefore in order to generate that, you need to turn over £400,000. All of a sudden we've got a fee target. Okay, now we need individuals that can produce £400,000 worth of work a year. Yeah, so we'll pick some numbers out of the air. So that could probably be 4 individuals, 4 accounts production people. Okay, so, and I'll pick some rubbish maths now, so I'm going to give some approximations, but 4 people, £100,000 a year each. So divide that by 12. So they need to produce £8,333 of fee income per month.
Yeah.
Okay. So the company key performance indicator is a 12th each month, is a 12th of 400,000, and then the individual team members adds up to that 40,000. Now they don't all have to be 8,333. Obviously, there could be a 5,000, a 15,000, and a 10,000 and a 10,000 for argument's sake. But all of a sudden, you've got some numbers and you've got some clarity for your team. And if somebody that's supposed to be producing £10,000 worth of fees produces 8,000, and therefore your target is missed by 2,000, then you've got some accountability in order to go to them and help them, support them, mentor them in order to get better. So all of the targets is like leads generated, for example. So we want to generate, I don't know, for argument's sake, say we want 1 new customer a month. And to do that, we need to generate 4 leads. Okay. Who's responsible for generating those leads? Well, if you've got 3 people that are forward facing or working with customers, you need 4 leads from 3 people. Somebody's got to produce 2, and the other 2 have got to produce 1 each. Yeah, so they get allocated to those individuals. And then again, as I say, at the end of the month, David, you've produced, your target was 2 and you've done 1. Where did the other 1 come from? What are you going to, and it gives you an objective conversation about improvements that they can make.
Yeah, that's great. And how does that, because I know you've got kind of like team goals and individual goals and the company goals. So how do they all kind of, in my head, I'm picturing like Russian dolls kind of fit into each other. So they ultimately all feed into the the main goal.
Yeah. So when you get a bit bigger and you've potentially got a payroll department and a bookkeeping department and an accounts production department, let's go with those three. Say for argument's sake that the turnover of the practice is £40,000, then you can go down and say, right, okay, the bookkeeping team need to produce 10,000. The payroll team need to produce 10,000 and the accounts team need to produce 20,000. And then the individuals within that accounts team, they might be producing 6,330 quid or whatever it is each in order to get to their 20,000. So once the practice has got big enough, you can look at the overriding, the top level numbers, and then you can break it down across the fee generating numbers and then all the way down to the individual members of those teams. Now, we're at 20. We play with the team aspect of it, but because different people end up in different places, I'm not convinced that we'll get a return on the investment in measuring a team KPI like that. Now, I know when you listen to the language within the team, they do focus on whether they are contributing as a team together, but it's not as overt as the individual and the company measures for us.
Yeah. And just touch on that briefly, Simon. I know we've talked about this before, but like there's a concept of a pod structure. And I know that we had that in our firm. So we had these individual pods and each pod was made up of a team of kind of each person. So like the equivalent of an FD, an FC, a bookkeeper, an accounts assistant or whatever it was. And we had all these pods and it felt really cool. And while all the team members were still there, that was great. And then all of a sudden you've got one team member that's screwed up in this one massively and been screwing up for 6 months. We've not spotted it. So we had to get rid of him. We now need this pod to kind of support that pod. The guy in this one left, then all the FCs left. And like this pod structure just crumbled in front of us and we had to really reimagine and re-engineer it. So while it felt cool, the reality is it wasn't cool. And you just talked about there of a bookkeeping department, of a payroll department and stuff. Could you just talk into that a little bit for me, please, Simon?
Yeah, so the concept of pods for me just smacks of a stereotypical traditional accountancy practice that's got 3 or 4 partners across the top, and they've got individuals underneath those partners that produce work for that partner. And in the old days, one partner won't do a job for the other partner, and one team member won't go and do, and because, well, I don't work for that partner, I only work for this partner, and all the other rubbish that comes along with that. So for me, it's much better having teams of people that are specialist or are skilled in producing books keeping or VAT or R&D or whatever it is. And then when a customer comes along, now you pick the best people from the teams in order to deliver the service for that customer. So they might work with customer manager A, accounts prep person B, payroll person D, and then the next one that comes along might work with customer manager B, accounts person A, or whatever. So you can work out the combinations. And I think about it like this. So with football teams, you have a goalkeeper, a defense, a midfield team, and you have an attacking force, some attacks. Now, they're going forward as a unit. Whereas if you never talk about the left side of the team and the center of the team and the right hand side, because that's their silos. So it's like the right hand side, if they need to, the right side of the defense, they'll go over to the left hand side and they'll help in the back. But you wouldn't take the person at the back that's playing defense and stick him on the left wing just because he's on the left side or the right side of the team. So it makes no sense from a team perspective for me at all.
Yeah, that's cool. That's good. What's the number one mistake, Simon, that people make when setting targets for team members?
Number one is they set the targets for the team first. So
okay.
What generally happens is a team member is not performing. So some bright spark sits there and says, right, what we're going to do is we'll set KPIs for Johnny, and then we'll know whether he's performing or not. Okay. So what are those KPIs going to be? I don't know. Okay. And the reason why you don't know is because you haven't set the KPIs for the practice. So it's a complete waste of time and effort, and ultimately upsets Johnny and you because you've just set arbitrary targets that you've just picked out of the air. They've got no connection to the bigger picture, and it's an absolute waste of time. So that's the number one. Just don't do it.
And is that normally what happens? So for example, a firm will come to you, Simon, we've got a challenge here. I've got this member of staff here. I know he's not pulling his weight. I know he's not doing good enough. So then what they do is they then go and set a specific target for this client, for this member of staff, sorry, but they've not thought about that, how that feeds into the bigger picture. And then rather than solve the problem, which is what they thought it would, it's now just going to make things worse.
Yeah, and because it's a guess of a number, and the reason why people go there, and I'll be provocative about it, is because they're lazy. So just the same as earlier, you said about personal goals and business goals, that can be hard work. People want to get it right, yeah. Now, and you bet version 1's better than version 0, etc., etc. So because they don't want to go there, they're afraid of committing. They're afraid of sharing because people might laugh at them or they might fail. They don't want to go there. And however, they're prepared to impose that on a team member because there's an air of authority and an element of ego there. And it's just basic laziness, and I think it's completely disrespectful to the team member. The other thing that they do when they go through that process as well is they give them targets that the team member has no control over. So they'll say things like, or they'll set a target that says you need to produce a set of accounts in 21 days, for argument's sake. It's a classic, yeah. And the team member will sit there and go, well, what about if the customer doesn't give me the information? Well, it's your responsibility to get the information from the customer and deliver the accounts in those 21 days. Now, unless you give that team member the authority to go around to that customer with a gun and point it at their head and say, you give me the information now, they've got no authority or any control in order to deliver the KPI that's been set. So you need, as I say, you need to look at the bigger picture, work out where it is that you're going to go, make sure that you have the control. And then when you deliver those KPIs to the team member, they've got the authority. So you give them permission to do it and the responsibility to hit the numbers.
So this ties into then, so if that's a bad attribute of a target, because you're giving them something that's outside of their control, what attributes do great targets have then, Simon? So how could you set that target in a way that works for that member of staff?
Absolute clarity on the number, and ultimately to be completely within the responsibility of the individual. Now, we'll talk about accounts production targets because it runs as a theme. Instead of saying it's 21 days to produce a set of accounts, what you can do is say it's 16 days from when you receive the information to when the accounts land on my desk for review. Yeah. So you need to go in the accounts production process, you need to go really specific. So at Greenstones, every single time a set of accounts changes hands during the accounts production process, it's monitored. So I can say, okay, it takes a day to book a job in on average. A job sits in the cupboard before it gets started, 7 days on average, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, all of that data is there. We don't monitor it because I could spend all month monitoring how that works. But as soon as we have a problem, so on average we're producing accounts in 23 days, not 21 days, then we can go to the spreadsheets, work out where the shortfall is, change the language when we request for information, and focus on improving the system, because that's a system problem rather than the individual problem. Now, if Johnny is taking 3 days on average to book a job in, then Johnny needs a slap, I was going to say, in order to motivate him.
You know, you can't hit staff.
I do. Yes, I do.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I do.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I walk around with a P45 strapped to my back. So it's sort of that psychological warfare type scenario. But yeah, sorry.
No, that's cool. So how do you get staff to do, how do you help them to do the things you want them to do when they are failing? We've got a few questions here around kind of monitoring staff, disciplining staff, encouraging staff, coaching staff, because you said a few key things there, Simon, which is ultimately my beliefs are you can't grow your business. All you can do is grow your team, and they in turn will grow the business. But you don't want your team running the business. You want systems running the business, as you just said there. And you ideally want the team to be them running the systems. And when I say growing the team, I don't necessarily mean in numbers. It could be growing them as individuals and helping them to flourish and to become the very best they can be. So how do you manage that in terms of helping them to flourish, to become the best they can be? And when it goes awry, how do you kind of bring them back on track? And if it goes really off track, how do you kind of handle that?
So first thing, staff. I hate that word with a passion. Absolute passion. Staff to me implies old Victorian houses, and the staff live down underneath the very important people at the top that are owners of the house or owners of the practice. So I'm very anti-staff. Team member, employees I could probably get away with. Team members is much more a favorite of mine. Yeah, colleagues is because we are all equals operating in the business in order to achieve the vision, the mission of the objectives that we want to achieve. Now, every now and again, you'll have a team member that's underperforming. The first thing, if I get somebody, an accountant, come to me and say, I've got a team member underperforming, what should I do? The first thing I always ask them to do is to write a letter of expectation. Okay? Wow. A letter of expectation. What is it that you expect that team member to do? Okay, so what are the outputs and when do you want it? Okay, so what do I want and when do I want it? Next section is always, what support do you need or what support am I going to give you? Yeah. And then lastly, what are the consequences if you fail to meet my expectation? Okay, so 4 steps. What and when do I want? What support and resources do you need? What are the consequences if you don't hit that? Now, I have lost count over the years. It would be 90%, 95% of accountants that I ask to write that letter of expectation to their team member do not send it to the team member, because they write it and then they're embarrassed about the lack of clarity that they've given their team member. And it's like, well, if you don't know what you want the team member to do, how on earth is the team member supposed to deliver what it is that you want? And they'll say, well, it's just not quite working out. They're not working hard. Okay, so what does that mean to you? Okay, well, they're sitting there on Facebook. Okay, so they're sat there on Facebook, but they might have already done what you've expected them to, what they think you've expected them to do. If you've not given them clarity over what it is that they want, then how are they supposed to deliver what it is? And as I say, the amount of letters of expectations that I have seen accountants draft and they've sent to me, and I've looked at it. So managing client relationships. We expect you to manage client relationships. Okay. So what does managing client relationships mean? I don't know. Okay, well, if you don't know, you've written it down, how on earth are they supposed to know? Okay, so let's define managing. Yeah, so is it once a month, once a week, once a day? Do you need to be ringing them as opposed to them ringing you? Do you need to be making 10? And you go into that detail, and once you've got that level of expectation, that level of clarity, and both sides of that relationship know where they are, then if the team member fails to commit, then there shouldn't be any, fails to achieve that, there shouldn't be any surprises in the future when you have a conversation with them about no longer being in the practice.
Yeah, no, that's so good, Simon. That's so good that you know, and people are asking a couple of questions here. Do you actually send those letters out? Those letters
I have sent those, yes. So definitely. So the way the process works normally is I'm upset with a team member. So I sit down and I'll write a letter of expectation. In the writing of the letter of expectation, I realize what a plonker I've been and that I have not given clarity to the team member. So I go back a stage to what I call the holding hands stage. Now, the reason why I call it holding hands is because I picture myself walking down the road side by side with the team member, holding hands, having a conversation about what it is, what challenges they've got and what they need to do. And then within that conversation, you can then move on to, as I say, the letter of expectation. So we'll go back to the holding hands. What challenges have you got? Okay, let's deal with those challenges. Still not resolved. Then you move on to the letter of expectation. And once you've got clarity over that, James, it's then a conversation with the team member, because you're setting your expectations. You need to know what support they need. So it's not me writing to the team member and saying, right, this is it. It's a collaborative experience still. And then once you've agreed on the letter of expectation, then I'll send it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that first part, that holding hands, is always really important, isn't it? You know, if ever we've got a challenge with a member of staff, my first question is everything all right? Like, yeah, is everything okay at home? Because there could be all sorts of manner of things going on that you've just not dug deep into that, and you're about to wade into them because they've messed up or whatever, and then you find out that some family members ill or whatever. So obviously that's really important. And that clarity, and I'm just going to pick up on there as well, that the people are embarrassed. Well, there are 2 things I'm just going to pick up on here, Simon. One is accepting responsibility, so important. You know, like from our side with GoProposal, with how we help firms, I hear so many accountants saying, I've got bad clients. Okay. Well, what are you doing to help them to become good? Have you told them all the services you can do? Have you tried to sell them? Have you got them paying properly? Have you told them the consequences of what will happen if you like? Great clients don't exist. You're not. This is a key thing. Great clients don't exist. Great staff don't exist. If you keep looking out there for great clients and great staff, you're screwed, because you're going to be forever searching for them. It's going to cost you a fortune. It's about accepting responsibility to say, how can I make my clients great and how can I make my staff great? Now, obviously, there'll always be times when you have to let people go, but it's how much responsibility can you accept to be able to make that client great? And one point there is people are always afraid to explain the consequences to people. And it always surprises me. We had it in our firm in MAP, where we had a member of staff. He'd been messing up and we got let go in the end. He was not a good member of staff. But at a point in that journey, one of our senior members of team had to sit down and have a conversation with him. So we didn't have the structure there at the time, Simon, of this, of the letter of expectation, but it was effectively that. And he came out of the meeting with him, and I said to the guy, did you say to him that if he doesn't solve this and make these changes within 30 days, he's going to be sacked? Oh, I didn't say that to him. Well, why not? You are not being fair to that member of staff if you don't tell him the consequences. Because I'll tell you something now, I will be sat in front of him in 30 days' time and I will sack him. So you've got to explain what those consequences are. And then that gives the person an opportunity to rise up and to become that everything that you need them to be, and you support them in that journey, or they go. And it's just that honesty, isn't it, Simon? And we tend we've talked about this a lot before, the courage to ask the questions, the courage to have the conversations with our clients and with our staff. And if you don't have that, it just causes so many problems.
Yeah, very much so. So there shouldn't be any surprises in that process, basically. So if you're letting somebody go at the end of the process, then they should, well, normally they've gone before they get to the end of the process, because they know what's coming. Somebody said to me many moons ago, Simon, it's easy to sack somebody. It's harder to tell them off. Because if you tell them off, you've got to see them the next day. Whereas if you sack them, it's a bit uncomfortable, obviously, to start with, but then they've gone and you've never got to see them anymore. So having that clarity, that understanding with the team member, ultimately it gets you to the point where, okay, well, I've done the best I can do. I can't do any more than that, and therefore it's no longer my responsibility. Your performance is no longer my responsibility, and you need to accept the consequences of it.
Yeah. One thing that I always find useful in that is, if you do have to have a difficult conversation with a member of staff, obviously you're going to sit down with them. They don't know where you're going with it. They don't know what the outcome is. So you've got your outputs there and when, but I always start with as well is what my intentions are. So Simon, I think you're a great person. I would love to work with you for many years. I want to keep rewarding you and keep paying you more and more money and, et cetera, and explain what my genuine intention is with this relationship here. However, now I can explain to you what my issue with you is, because I've told you where I ideally want to go with you, where we want to get to. But until you've communicated that, it's kind of a scary process, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. There's another great book called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. And Keith shares a script for the beginning of that conversation. And it goes along the lines of, help me to understand. Okay, I'm sorry. It's my responsibility. Either I've not explained to you how important it is, or I've not trained you adequately. Which one is it? And if they say anything other than I didn't know how important it was, or I hadn't had the training, if they say anything other than that, i.e. I can't really be asked, then they shouldn't be in the organization anyway. Yeah. So it's either a training issue or an importance issue. And then once you've established which one of those is, then you can go through the process of the letter of expectation.
Cool. Right, Simon, we've got so many questions that people have asked. There's some brilliant questions here. I want to work through them and I want to make sure that we give people plenty of time. I've asked if you can kindly stay on as long as it takes to answer these questions, and hopefully people will as well. But I appreciate that we did set a timeline for this, and hopefully we've helped to kind of breathe some life and insight into certain areas. We've probably opened up more challenges as well for people to think about. But so we're going to go into the questions. I don't know how long it's going to take, maybe 20 minutes or something like that. But just before we do that, in case anyone does need to leave on the time, Simon, can I just ask about how you cope if people do want more help with this? How can people get more support and help from you? And kind of what do those levels look like?
So there's a couple of ways that people can work with me, or accountants can work with me. One is on a one-to-one basis, and I'm currently full on that basis. So
Okay.
I've got no other opportunities for that. The second way is through the Accountants Mastermind community. So we run mastermind groups for accountants, and at the moment we've got 2 physical groups, so they meet physically every other month in Peterborough, and we've got 2 virtual groups that meet every month via Zoom. So if anybody's interested in doing that, Mark's going to pop in the chat box now a URL that they can go away and have a look and work and see how that process works. Now, the investment for that is £445 plus the VAT a month. And I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, James, expecting people to come onto this call, listen to me speak this morning and go, oh, isn't Simon fantastic, and start throwing money at me, because it's not, generally speaking, how it happens when I keep my clothes on. If I take my clothes off, then all sorts of people do all sorts of things. But anyway,
What to get you to put it back on again?
That's right. Yeah, that's
Reclothed.
Another story. So what I ask people to do, and what I encourage people to do, is to join the community. And Mark is going to pop a URL in the chat box. There are 9 ways to join the community. There's a Facebook group, there's a YouTube channel, there's obviously LinkedIn, there's a WhatsApp group. There's a whole different places that you can come along and get information for free. And ultimately, you post your questions in there, and I will gladly support you and share ideas with you as best I can. Obviously, if you're not a paying customer, then the paying customers take precedence, but I will support you as much as I can. And then lastly, on the 30th of July, my first ever book, or second book technically, is coming out. I've been writing this book since 2012, so it's it has been a labor of love. If you go to the free resources section on the website, which again Mark will pop in the chat box, you can get a recruitment book, you can get a referral book, 21 savvy software tips, and also an initial client information sheet. So you can have those today with my blessing. And then when this is published, well, leading up to when this is published on the 30th of July, I will share how you get that basically from Amazon. And in the book, as I say, it goes through the KPIs, it details the HEF process, the letter of expectation, how you run an away day, how you set the key performance indicators for the practice, and all those sort of things. So any one of those 3 links, whatever you want, connect with me on LinkedIn as well, and I will gladly support you as best I can.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Simon. Thank you. That's really cool. Cheers. And connect with you on LinkedIn as well, because I know that you share things on there. And
massively. Yeah, Twitter. I'm not. I am on Twitter, but it's not my favorite platform. But yeah, if you subscribe to the channel on YouTube, or connect with me on LinkedIn, or join the Facebook group, that's where, and the WhatsApp groups, they're the 2 places where I spend lots of my time helping accountants with the questions that they've got.
Cool. Thank you, Simon. So we're going to dig deep into these questions now, and this can be, really illuminating, because this is what people really want to hear. So Helen has asked, we have great fun in the office together. How do you maintain that collaborative fun teamwork if you're not physically in an office?
That's a really great question, Helen. And one of the downfalls of the process and the system that we run is that lack of connection, that lack of team spirit. Now, I don't believe that the team spirit that we've currently got is as good as what it was back in 2005. However, there's a few challenges to this. So we still do away days, we go to escape rooms, we do Christmas parties, we do all the different things that normal accountancy practices and normal businesses do. And the other thing that I should really add is that, although it sounds quite radical, most humans, they're creatures of habit. So although I know that the team can work wherever they like, whenever they like, I could put money on certain people coming after they've dropped the kids off, or they go to the gym in the morning. And because they want to be part of that team, they still work in the office the majority of the time, even though they don't have to. So it's not about the radicalization of it. When you first introduce it, everybody goes to the 4 corners of the world because it's a novel idea, but very quickly they come back and they work as they used to. So I don't believe, as I say, the team spirit is as high as what it was, but it's certainly still there, and is certainly of value. The second thing is why you feel that you need to have that team spirit and that fun within the office. Now, obviously the team need to be happy, and if they are happy, then they're producing a good service for their customers. I'm not, because I all of the people that work for me, I love the people, but I have friends outside. I have a social circle outside of work, and I have friends outside of work. And that's ultimately where I get my, what should I say, my social nourishment from, rather than effectively forcing people that don't know each other to like each other and have fun at work. And another point, which I was going to share earlier, James, about bonuses. Very often it's a lazy accountant's or a lazy business owner's way of motivating the team. So it's like, I can't get my team to work. So instead of sitting down and working out what it is that we want, and then giving them the clarity over what it is, just okay, we'll throw money at it, because money's, it's an easy thing. And I sometimes challenge accountants on whether that fun aspect is actually to replace giving them clarity. So there's a phrase about sticking Skittles in the kitchen. So sticking Skittles in the kitchen or beer on a Friday afternoon doesn't replace the clarity that you could give them of where it is that you want to go. It just masks the frustration that some of the team members might have.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I know there's not ever one thing that fixes everything, Simon, but having that clarity of direction and people knowing where they're going to. In GoProposal, we used to give bonuses until last year, depending on if we hit certain profit targets, and we'd share it equally amongst all the team. And then last year I decided, you know what, I can't expect any more than my team are giving. They're brilliant. They're doing so much work. So I just rolled all the bonuses into their wages, which effectively say, I'm backing you. Like, I know you're going to do great. I know we're doing well. I'll just pay you more cash. Let's just carry on with what we're doing. There's lots of evidence to suggest that, bonuses just don't, if you've got a good member of staff, a bonus will not motivate anyone to work any harder. There's many other things that they're actually looking for from their work rather than that. That's great.
And it's all of the research out there, James, all of the research out there say that bonuses don't work unless it's piecework. So if you're working in a factory or you're working in a field and you're getting paid per flower picked, bonuses work. But if you're in a creative industry like an accountants, then all of the research say that bonuses don't work. They just become a hygiene. So it just becomes an expectation. So they mentally become part of salary. And then ultimately they become a demotivator when they don't receive it. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't reward team members, but that's a completely different scenario. So one of the beauties of this system is that we can have a conversation. I can have a conversation with a team member, and because they're not under pressure to write down 6-minute units, I can listen to what they're saying. And if you listen to them, then you can hear what it is that they need, and then you can reward them with what they need, rather than just chucking 50 quid at them that goes into a bank account and gets spent on an Indian on a Friday night and forgotten about by Saturday morning type scenario.
Yeah, no, I agree. You just instantly took me back to my spring onion picking days in Lincolnshire then, Simon, at £6 a box. That was graft. Anyone that can do that, hats off to them. That's great. How do you make sure that your team are available when clients, this is by Lynn, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong there, but anyway, how do you make sure the team are available for clients when they are needed? If they can work at different hours, you got a client that wants them, how do you make sure they're available?
So very simply, there's 2 rules. Emails get responded to within 24 hours, 24 working hours, or basically, if we get an email by 11 o'clock or 11 o'clock on a Friday, it has to be responded to by 11 o'clock on the Monday. And telephone calls have to be responded to within 3 working hours. So our working hours, open office hours, are 8:30 to 4:30 Monday to Friday. So if we get a telephone call at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, they need to have returned that call by 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. So it's nothing more complicated than that.
Some good questions here around training team members, Simon. So training new team members, and how do you support team with difficult technical pieces if you're working remotely with different hours? So how do they get that support and training them with the skills that they need?
So again, this is a mental shift. So whether you're working in the office or working away from the office, it makes no difference from a training perspective. So you just train them exactly the same as what you would do if you was in the office. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't take a little bit more effort, and there is a mental mind shift that people have to go through in order to do that. But we have team members that are being trained, and the person that's training them, they're both in 2 separate locations, and they're on Zoom for like 2 hours at a time, and they're not talking, they're just working. But as soon as a team member's got a problem or they can't reconcile something, then they know that the support is there instantly. Now, the majority of people with Zoom or Teams, they ring up at a set time, they have a meeting, and then once they finish the meeting, they hang up. but there's no reason to hang up. You can just have it there, just the same as what you would do if you was in the office. You just have it there. The second thing is to make sure that the person that's doing the training has a KPI or key performance indicator, or at least change their KPIs to accommodate the training requirement that they're going to give them. And then thirdly, the person that's being trained, again, is another one of my bugbears. We've took on a trainee. Okay, so what are they going to do in week 1? Well, we're going to train them to do accounts. No, I asked you, what are they going to do in week 1? Well, I don't know. Okay, well, if you don't know, how are they? Yeah, so you need a training plan or a skills matrix. Again, it's talked about in the book. If you buy the book, you can have a skills matrix for as one of the free gifts. So you set out over a period of a month or 6 months or whatever period you feel most comfortable with, exactly what it is that they're going to do. So day 1 is fixed asset schedule. Day 3 is debtors. Day 67 is VAT control account, or whatever it is. And you map it out so they have clarity, you have clarity, and the person that's training them have clarity over what it is that they're going to deliver.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Simon. From Rachel Prideaux, how do you measure monthly turnover per individual if you have monthly compliance fees, but you're not actually working on that client that month?
Okay, so there's lots of different ways and lots of different structures for measuring accountancy fees. And over the years, it's got more and more complicated as different people do it in different ways. So I'll share what we do. Basically, on the jobs where we don't do monthly accounts, where we're not doing management accounts and stuff like that, we're just doing annual accounts, regardless of the fact that we bill monthly, we recognize the income annually on the individual. So when they produce the accounts, that at that point, when the accounts are drafted, then it gets recognized on their individual key performance indicators. If we've got a job where we're doing it monthly, so we're producing monthly management accounts, then the income gets recognized monthly on that individual key performance indicators. And we also measure that they're actually doing the job. So there's some checklists and whatnot that need ticking off in order for them to be able to claim that monthly amount. But depending on how you're structured and whether you're billing in year or out of year or in one go or whatever, then you need to come up with a system that works that works for you. So that's a bit more of a complicated conversation, but I'll happily have it.
That's good. If you're like, so if I've got a set quota of hitting 10K a month, but I'm not completing the set of annual accounts until the end of the year, and that's when that gets reconciled, will I not always be short in my monthly targets because I'm waiting for that end of year amount to hit?
Potentially, but there's two differences there, James. So if I'm producing a set of annual accounts and that's all I'm doing, then I might do a week's work to produce that set of accounts in October, and therefore that income gets recognized in October.
Okay.
If I'm producing real-time accounts, so I'm doing monthly accounts, November, December, January, February, all the way around to October, and then I'm producing statutory accounts, then the income gets recognized as they are doing the reconciliations throughout the year. It's a bit more complicated for us because we defer some of the income because of the accounts being done at the end, and we don't want to recognize the income before we've done the work. But I know some accountants view that differently. So basically, we allocate 90% of the monthly fee during the year, and then 10% is saved for the corporation tax and whatnot after we do the annual accounts.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Do you agree, roughly speaking, with the 1-to-1 fees to cost to profit model?
1-to-1. So 30 is fees. That third. So
third. Yeah. Third. Fees, costs, profit.
No, is a simple answer to that. So a third, I think is pretty historic. When we benchmark the members of the accountants mastermind, very few. In fact, I can name the one that does third. The majority of them, depending on how their practice is structured, the majority of them are running between about 42 and 62%. Greenstones, we run at 52%. So just over half of our turnover is spent on wages. And then you need to bring that back and remember that I'm not doing any work at all. So, and then you can get in. So and again, this is not my quote, but when you're comparing your KPIs, when you're comparing your numbers, you need to compare them against yourself. So if your margin is currently 40% or your team cost of fees is 40% and you would like it to be a third, then you need to measure what you're doing in order to get to a third.
Yeah.
And there's a little phrase that I learned not long ago that if you compare yourself to others, you'll get better. If you compare yourself to yourself, you'll get better. And I'm much more interested in getting better than getting bitter.
Oh, bitter. Sorry, I'm missing. Sorry, if you compare yourself to others, you get bitter.
Yes.
And if you compare yourself to yourself, you'll get better.
Better. That's right. Yeah, not bitter.
Yeah, I love that. No, that's great. That's great. How long? How do you work out how long a piece of work should take? So, for example, a set of statutory accounts and a corporation tax return. How do you determine what is good?
So we price it on GoProposal, and the fee goes out, and I'm happy with the prices that we charge based on the quality of the information, the quality of the records that the customer delivers to us. Okay. Now, ultimately, if I go to the team member and say, you need to do this job for £2,000, then the team member is perfectly within their right to say, I'm not doing that for £2,000 because it's a rubbish job. It should be £2,400. Yeah. And then we need to either make a decision. Either we go back to the client and charge £2,400, or I force the team member to do it for £2,000. Now, again, this is a longer conversation, but that clarity, that exposure to that conversation, I believe is much more, it's provocative, but it's much more collaborative because it's all open and it's all open and there. The alternative is that team member does it for £2,000 and then they go to the toilet or the photocopier machine or whatever it is, and they moan like Mary L about that customer because they're not being paid, or the customer's not being paid what they are worth. But so fair market value for the job, number one. Secondly, is the individual trained, competent to do that job for the amount of money that we are charging for it? And if not, it needs to be moved around and discussed.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, that was a great answer. It wasn't quite the question I asked, but I'll let you go with it because it was a great answer. The question, sorry, was, and I apologize for my lack of clarity in asking the question, Simon. I take full responsibility for that. But how long should each piece of work take? So let's say, for example, you're completing a piece of annual accounts 3 months after year end. How do you determine what that period of time should be? So what makes a good KPI effectively?
But when the accounts need to be filed after the year end of the customer?
For when you're completing pieces of work, yes. So how are you determining what is good for the completion of work?
So just there's two points in that, and I don't know whether this is the question. I know accountants that measure how quickly after the year end they file accounts at Companies House.
Yeah,
which is a rubbish measure for me. So if the client cares about it, then of course measure it for the client. But the majority of the clients, in my experience, don't care when the accounts are filed unless they're looking for a mortgage or a hire purchase, or they've had a rubbish credit reference or whatever. So for me, that's a rubbish measure. When we look at the individual aspects of when we're producing accounts, so let's go back to my 21 days. If we say, I will just look at it objectively, say, right, okay, how long should it take to book a job in? Well, I think no longer than a day. So that's day one. Yeah. How long should it sit on the shelf for? Well, if we're going to do it in 21 days, because that's what the client's expecting, it can't really sit on the shelf for any more than 7 days. So we're now at 8 days. Yeah. When a team member takes the job out of the cupboard, let's say 3 days. So we're now at 11 days. So that 21 days is broken down across the accounts production system. Now, once you've done that, I mean, once upon a time we was at 45 days. Once you've done that, you can then say, right, okay, well, it's taken us 3 days to get the information from the customer. What can we do to get it from 3 days to 2 days? And we start analyzing the system. And that's the comparing against ourselves rather than some accountant in a Facebook group saying, oh, we file all accounts within 6 days of the year end. I don't know, la-di-la-di-la, I don't care. That's not, I'm in a different place to where you are.
Yeah. No, I love that again, compare. So what should you be aiming for? And it's an improvement on where you are. And once you start to get granular with those numbers, it's important. And there's a good book that I read years ago called 2 Lengths of the Pool. And it was a swimming coach dealing with his one of his swimmers that he was working with. And they got so confused with all these different things they should be aiming to do. So he's got to win gold. He's got to beat his competitor. He's got to impress the crowd. His family have got to be happy. There's all these things that he thought he should be doing. And when they broke it down, he swam 100. is swimming. What the category he was in was to swim 100 meters in a 50-meter pool. So his job was to swim 2 lengths of the pool as fast as he could. That was it. There was nothing else mattered. So then what they did was they then broke the training down and say, right, what are all the factors that contribute to you swimming 2 lengths of the pool as fast as you can? So from what you're wearing to your stroke, to how your turn is, to etc. And all they did was look to improve things in each one of those areas. But you can't do that, back to your point at the start of all of this, Simon, you can't do that while you're being pulled in all these different directions of where you think you should be going. Until you've got clarity over what your goal is, which is swim 100 meters as fast as you can, you can't now then break it down into how do you get there better? How do you get there faster?
Yeah, very much so. Couldn't argue with you at all on that one.
Thank you. What split would you expect between fee earning activities, learning, admin, meetings? Do you have anything around that?
Not massively. So a development activity. So every team member has to do one development activity a month. So, and that takes about an hour.
That's one of their KPIs. Yeah.
That's one of their KPIs. Yeah. And a learning development or development activity is something that takes about an hour that helps you do a better job. And I don't care what that is, as long as it helps you do a better job. And over the years, I've had all sorts of weird and wonderful things like DVDs and films that people have watched, and they've been able to give me a business case for watching that film as a development activity. Flipping that out, I have an accounts production team. An accounts production team produce accounts. The admin team or the customer care team, they do the admin. The bookkeeping team do the bookkeeping. I'm not sure why I would have an accounts person doing an admin role. Generally speaking, accounts people are not the most outgoing of people, whereas the admin team need to be ringing up people and getting records in and stuff like that. So we don't have a split. I know in the good old days, people used to talk about 80% productivity and 90% recoverability. And all that used to do, in my mind, is give me permission to have 20% of the week off because I could do admin in that time. So I don't have any splits like that. It's all about outputs, not allocating the inputs.
Cool. What about when staff, the last few questions, guys, what about when staff become too much in demand?
Too much in demand.
So I guess you got a specific team member and they're now getting to their capacity. I mean, how do you kind of plan for that? How do you prepare for that? Or what would you do in that scenario if you know, so I don't know, you talked about specific roles before, so you could be an R&D tax person within your company and all of a sudden now the demand has grown. How do you deal with that?
So the beauty of measuring their outputs is that you can see, obviously from a practice point of view, say, for example, we'll go back to the £40,000 worth of fees that we was talking about earlier. If you take on a new client and that client's worth, let's say £2,000 a month, then all of a sudden you've got 42. So who am I going to allocate that £2,000 to? Oh, hang on a minute. All of the team members are full up. So they're all producing as much as they can. So that means I need a new team member. And it doesn't happen like that, because you look at it and you think, okay, well, I've only got £3,000 worth of capacity. I've only got £1,000 worth of capacity. So you're recruiting when you've got the capacity ready for when you go over the 40 grand. Or alternatively, you say to that person, I'm ever so sorry, mate, I can't take you on at the moment. I haven't got capacity for that £2,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you look at the worst client you've got and you sack the worst client in order to take on the £2,000, and the team will think you're wonderful.
I like it. Okay, quick fire. Are there any issues with employees working overseas, tax, health and safety, GDPR, employment law? Do you employ anyone overseas?
We've got some people in the Philippines. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you employ them direct or through an agency? Or
we employ them through an agency. The GDPR stuff stays exactly the same.
Yeah.
If they work outside of Greenstones in the UK, then it goes exactly the same. So GDPR, confidentiality agreements, fit and proper stuff is all exactly the same.
Yeah.
Health and safety stuff, it's a little bit more complicated because they can only work from home incidentally. And then there's a bit of a process that we have to go through. And then if they work at home full time, there's a more sophisticated process that we have to go through.
Yeah.
I don't do health and safety. I have a person at Greenstones that does the health and safety stuff for me with a consultant that comes in and helps us.
Nice. So out of those 22 members of staff, how many do you have overseas? Sorry, Simon.
2.
Okay, cool. If the staff don't record time, how do you know whether they have extra time to take on more clients or whether they're overworking?
So the time aspect's irrelevant. It's the outputs.
Yeah.
So if I believe that somebody, say for example, somebody's earning £2,000 a month, they should be producing £12,000 worth of fees. So across the average, across the firm, it should be 12 grand. Yeah. If I haven't got work to give them, then they should be sat there twiddling their thumbs, basically.
Yeah.
If I have given them 14 grand's worth of work, then they should be swearing at me because they've got too much work to do. That's the crux of it. Now, what tends to happen is if somebody's working too much, they'll moan about it. And then you just have to listen. And then as a manager, you form an opinion as to whether they could be working more efficiently, working smarter, or whether they've got a point. And again, it goes back to the conversation right at the beginning. All the people that work for me, I know them, I trust them. They are all grown-ups. Okay. Now, there's still that employer-employee relationship. Don't get me wrong, but we are all on the same team, working towards the same goals. We're going in the same direction. And if we can't have an open, I'm going to use the word conflict conversation, ultimately because there's a lack of trust there. So we need to trust each other in order to be able to have the conflict. And then me as the leader needs to make a decision as to whether I think any action needs to be taken or not.
Yeah. And a similar question there as well, Simon, in terms of how do you know if a client is profitable, if you're not tracking time versus the work versus what they're paying, how do you know if they're profitable or they fall out of profit?
So it's very simply, you ask the team. So if I walk into the office tomorrow and say to the team, who are the 10 least profitable customers that we've got at Greenstones? I'll bet they'd name them. And the same with whoever's asked that question. If you ask your team, who are the least profitable customers that you've got in your practice? You probably don't even need to ask your team. You probably know yourself. Who is the least profitable customer that you've got? There'll be a name that pops into your head and you'll go, they are a pitter. They never deliver the information on time. They always moan about the fees, etc., etc. And you'll effectively be prostituting yourself by working for them because you are sacrificing your time in exchange for the money that they're, and your emotional balance as well, in exchange for the money that they are sending. But you don't need timesheets in order to establish whether a customer is profitable or not. You know, in your heart of hearts.
Yeah, that's cool. A couple more questions, Simon, then we're done. And everyone else as well. Thank you, everyone, who's still on the call. I'm sure you're here because you're finding this really engaging and getting a lot of value from it. That's really great. Thank you. Love the letter of expectation idea. Could you give some more examples that could go into the consequences section, because he thinks that would be the bit he finds least comfortable to write?
Yeah, so the consequences is ultimately the disciplinary process. So for us, I do holding hands, letter of expectation. If you fail to hit the letter of expectations, we then go formal. So it's first warning. For us, it's first warning, second warning, fired. Yeah, and that's the simple process. If you want to do something different to that, so there wants to be some other consequences, you could, I suppose, have a conversation about reducing salary if they don't hit the outputs. So you renegotiate their employment contract. But in my experience, it goes up the disciplinary process. So whatever the next part of your formal disciplinary process is. So, and if I'm on first warning, I will revise the letter of expectation. And then the consequences in the revised letter of expectation is that you'll go to the second warning.
But could they lose freedoms, like Sam? So obviously you're allowing people to work whenever and wherever. Could it be right for the next month, do you have to work back in the office 9 to 5, or is that never a part of it?
Well, I won't say that's never happened, but if you believe that a team member has the ability to manage themselves, saying to them, okay, you've got to be in the office from 9 o'clock and go home at 5 o'clock. It's a bit like saying to Ben or Amy, okay, you've got to sit at the table until you've eaten your dinner. It doesn't help the trust. Now, occasionally we'll have a conversation with a team member when we're doing the letter of expectation, or we'll do the holding hands conversation, and they'll say, well, it's a bit difficult at the moment at home because this is happening or that's happening and all the rest of it. And I might say, well, how do you feel about, or do you think it might be advantageous to you to spend more time in the office? Yeah, and never thought about coming into the office to work. It'd be a lot quieter if it's in the office, or I'll go upstairs in the office or whatever. Yeah, I can't think of an occasion where I mandated that somebody lost the right to manage their own lives, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah. The bit I was caught up on there was making your kids eat the food. And I think when I was thinking like Leo and Scarlett, when they get to the end of their meal, it's like you start bartering. Right? Well, look, just eat 5 more peas, 2 more pieces of pasta, and 1 piece of broccoli. Then you're like bartering over, like you don't have to eat it all, but just that. Just lick the broccoli, and then leave the table. There we go. Okay. So just a few other questions, but I think they're kind of recaps on what people have already asked in terms of where you store the KPIs. You're using them on a spreadsheet, and everyone can see everyone else's KPIs. Can they, Simon?
Definitely, wholeheartedly. Yeah, everybody sees everybody else's numbers.
And everyone can see your numbers, the goals as well of where we're.
Oh, very much so. Yeah. So they can log in, they can see Greenstones accounts, they can see my personal tax return, and they can see all of everybody can see everybody else's numbers. And there's an element of social accountability in that, because obviously people don't want other people seeing the numbers if they're not hitting their numbers.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to respect everyone's time and yours, Simon. I'm going to hit 12:30 as an ending, but I just thank you so much, Simon. I know we have many conversations between these type of events and things like that. I'm hugely grateful for the work that you do with our firm and for what you do in the industry, and for how generous you are with everything that you're sharing, Simon. Like to my mind, you've got to look. If you want to grow, if you want to make these breakthroughs in your business and in your life, it's about looking to the people who are achieving the results that you want to achieve. You very kindly shared you got a £1.4 million revenue business with 22 people that you work between 1 and 2 days a week in. I mean, I think that's incredible. And then that allows you to develop this other business and supporting other people and helping other people as well, Simon, and passing that back down. So it's amazing that you've done that. Thank you for sharing all the different ways that people can get help from you, working with you, getting involved in your community, in your group coaching programs as well. And also for giving people nice little stepping stones into that through events like this, through your mastermind groups, and through the free resources that you've got that is being shared there, and also through your book as well. When your book goes live, let us know and we can share that. Guys, thank you so much for everyone who's been on here. The fact that we've still got 130 odd people still on the call after an hour and a half is fantastic. I just invite you all to share the one line, the one snippet with us online on some social post somewhere, tag myself and Simon or GoProposal into it, and just share your learnings. That would really be appreciated. And the final thing to say is this is a masterclass, guys. This is about not learning. It's okay if you've got a book full of notes. I've made loads of notes while I've been on here as well. Taking notes is cool. Taking action is the only thing that's going to make any difference in your life or in your business. Just take one step. So I would take the last couple of minutes or the next 5 minutes of thinking, what is the one thing that you are going to do? What is that one thing that you are going to do to move yourselves forward with? Could be connecting with Simon, could be joining one of his groups, could be emailing a member of staff or whatever. What's the one thing you do to move yourself forward? Simon, would you like to close out with anything, any pearls or anything like that?
And as I said at the beginning, the book comes out on the 30th of July. If you stick your name in and get the free resources, I will be badgering people to buy a copy and comment on the book in the not too distant future. So you'll definitely see that. My overriding thing, and you've touched on this halfway through, is about being courageous. So off the back of the conversation that you've had or heard today, what's the one thing that you would do if you was being courageous? That little tiny scary thing that takes you out of your comfort zone, not into your crisis zone. Don't go mad, but just takes you out of your comfort zone into your can-do zone, and then please go away and do it. I'd love to hear what it is.
Love that. That's great. Well, Simon, thank you once again for everything you do, for being on this call as well, for being so generous with everything that you're sharing. Thank you to everyone who's attended this, either watching the recording or attending this live. Thank you for staying on for this length of time. Hopefully we've answered all your questions. If there's anything that we've not touched upon, please reach out to Simon, message him on LinkedIn or whatever, and get your questions answered. Other than that, what day are we on? Thursday? Is it Thursday today?
It's Thursday. Yeah,
anyways, I know it's Thursday. It's a couple of the bins out this morning. Okay. Thursday today. Enjoy the rest of your week. Let's smash it, guys. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.